Marcus Chen had always been invisible. In high school, he was the kid who fixed everyone's computers but never got invited to parties. In college, he was the one solving impossible coding problems while his classmates struggled with basic algorithms. Even now, at 28, walking through the bustling offices of Dataflow Solutions, he moved like a ghost through the corporate machinery. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. His cubicle sat in the far corner of the development floor, squeezed between the server room's humming wall and a rarely used storage closet. While his colleagues enjoyed the natural light from the floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus worked under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, surrounded by towers of technical manuals and empty energy drink cans, but Marcus preferred it this way. The isolation gave him focus, and focus was what he needed for the work he really did at Dataflow Solutions. 3 years ago, when Marcus first joined the company, Dataflow was bleeding money. Their customer relationship management platform was a patchwork of outdated systems held together by digital duct tape and prayers. Client complaints flooded in daily about slow response times, system crashes, and data inconsistencies. The company's reputation was circling the drain, and competitors were swooping in to steal their biggest accounts. That's when Marcus began his real work, working 16-hour days, fueled by nothing but determination and caffeine. Marcus didn't just fix the existing system, he rebuilt it from the ground up. Not officially, of course. His job title was Junior Software Developer, and his official responsibilities involved maintaining legacy code and fixing minor bugs. But late at night, long after his colleagues had gone home to their families and social lives, Marcus architected something extraordinary. He called it the Neural Processing Engine. Though no one else knew it existed, the NPE was a masterpiece of modern programming, a self-learning system that could predict user behavior, optimize database queries in real time, and automatically resolve conflicts before they became problems. It was the kind of innovation that tech giants like Google or Microsoft would pay millions to acquire, and Marcus had built it entirely on his own time, using his own resources. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Response times that once measured in seconds dropped to milliseconds. System crashes became a thing of the past. Customer satisfaction scores soared from a dismal 2.3 out of 10 to an industry-leading 9.7. Dataflow's client retention rate jumped from 42% to 96%, and new customers began signing up faster than the sales team could process the contracts. But here's the crucial detail that would later prove devastating for Dataflow Solutions. Marcus had been careful. Very careful. Every line of code in the neural processing engine was written on his personal equipment, during his own time, using algorithms he had developed before joining the company. Legally, it belonged to him entirely. The integration with Dataflow's existing systems was done through carefully crafted APIs and interfaces that he controlled completely. To anyone examining the official company codebase, the NPE appeared to be just another vendor service, like their email provider or cloud hosting platform. The official Dataflow developers worked on what they thought was the main system, never realizing they were essentially maintaining a facade. They optimized database queries that the NPE had already made irrelevant. They debugged issues that the NPE prevented from occurring. They implemented features that the NPE had been providing invisibly for months. Meanwhile, the executives took credit for the company's miraculous turnaround. Richard Hawthorne gave interviews to trade publications about his innovative leadership approach and cutting-edge development methodologies. The board of directors voted him a six-figure bonus for exceptional performance in operational efficiency. Marcus watched it all from his corner cubicle, saying nothing. He had learned early in his career that taking credit for his work was a luxury he couldn't afford. Previous jobs had taught him that being indispensable made you a target just as often as it made you valuable. Corporate politics had a way of turning your greatest strengths into weapons that others used against you. So Marcus kept his head down and his mouth shut. He maintained the neural processing engine, continuously improving its algorithms and expanding its capabilities. He watched Dataflow's profits soar quarter after quarter, their stock price triple, and their employee count grow from 87 to over 300. And he stayed in the same corner cubicle, earning the same $65,000 salary he'd started with 3 years ago. The other developers respected Marcus in the quiet way that programmers respect someone who actually knows what they're doing. When they encountered problems they couldn't solve, they'd wander over to his cubicle with sheepish expressions and complicated technical questions. Marcus always helped, patiently explaining solutions and sharing insights that saved his colleagues hours or days of struggle. But respect from peers doesn't pay rent or student loans. Marcus lived in a studio apartment 20 minutes from the office, furnished with hand-me-downs from his parents and whatever he could find on Craigslist. While his colleagues bought houses in the suburbs and took vacations to Europe, Marcus drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a radio that only picked up AM stations. He didn't mind the modest lifestyle, not really. Money had never been his primary motivation. But watching the company he had single-handedly saved celebrate record profits while treating him like just another interchangeable cog in their machine was becoming increasingly difficult to stomach. The breaking point came during the annual performance review cycle. Marcus had prepared meticulously for his meeting with his direct supervisor, Trevor Walsh. He documented every project he'd worked on, every problem he'd solved, every improvement he'd implemented. He created detailed charts showing his productivity metrics compared to other developers on the team. He even compiled testimonials from colleagues who had benefited from his help. The meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. "Marcus, you're doing fine work," Trevor said, barely glancing at the folder of documentation. "Really solid contributions to the team. We're planning to give you a 3% raise this year, which is actually above average for someone at your level." 3%. On a $65,000 salary, that worked out to an extra $162 per month before taxes. "Trevor," Marcus said carefully, "I was hoping we could discuss my actual contributions to the company's success. I know the official metrics don't capture everything I do here, but if we look at the broader impact." "Look, Marcus, I get it. Everyone thinks they deserve more money. But you have to understand, raises are based on market rates and performance relative to your peer group. You're a junior developer working on maintenance tasks. The fact that you're getting anything above the standard 2% is actually pretty generous." Marcus stared at his supervisor, this man who couldn't write a functioning for loop if his life depended on it, dismissing 3 years of extraordinary work as maintenance tasks. That night, Marcus went home to his studio apartment and did something he'd never done before. He calculated his actual value to Dataflow Solutions, using publicly available financial data and his inside knowledge of the company's operations. Marcus built a comprehensive model of Dataflow's business performance. He tracked correlations between system improvements and customer acquisition, between uptime improvements and client retention, between response time optimizations and contract renewals. The numbers were staggering. In the 3 years since Marcus had implemented the neural processing engine, Dataflow's annual revenue had grown from $12 million to $53 million. Their profit margins had improved from -8% to +34%. The company's valuation had increased by over $200 million, and Marcus's direct contributions, the invisible improvements that made all of this possible, conservatively accounted for at least 60% of that growth. He was generating approximately $18 million in annual value for the company. And they were paying him $65,000 for it. That's when Marcus decided to ask for the raise that would change everything. He spent 2 weeks preparing his presentation, building an ironclad case for why he deserved a salary that actually reflected his contributions. He couldn't reveal the full extent of his work, that would require explaining the neural processing engine, which would complicate the legal ownership questions, but he could demonstrate clear correlations between his projects and business outcomes. The presentation was masterful. 37 slides of pure data-driven argumentation, showing how specific technical improvements had directly resulted in measurable business gains. Marcus had learned to speak the language of executives: return on investment, competitive advantage, market positioning. He requested a meeting with the senior leadership team, something that required weeks of coordination and several levels of approval. When the day finally arrived, Marcus walked into that conference room with confidence he'd never felt before. He was about to ask for what he was worth, $195,000 per year. What he got instead was the laughter that would echo in his memory for the rest of his life. But as Marcus walked back to his corner cubicle that day, something had fundamentally changed. The invisible programmer who had spent 3 years quietly holding the company together was done being invisible, and Dataflow Solutions was about to learn what happened when you underestimate the person who actually keeps your business running. The elevator descended through Dataflow Solutions' glass tower, each floor marking another level of Marcus Chen's descent from corporate naivety into cold, calculating awareness. As the numbers counted down, 32, 31, 30, he felt something fundamental shifting inside him, like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface of his consciousness. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. When the doors opened on the 20th floor, Marcus didn't immediately return to his cubicle. Instead, he walked to the massive windows overlooking the financial district, coffee cup in hand, and studied the city sprawling below. From this height, The bustling streets looked like circuit boards, with people and vehicles flowing along predetermined pathways like electrical current through carefully designed channels. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. He had spent 3 years designing the pathways that kept Dataflow's digital ecosystem functioning, and the executives upstairs saw him as just another replaceable component, a resistor or capacitor that could be swapped out without affecting the overall system performance. They had no idea that he wasn't just a component. He was the entire circuit. Marcus returned to his corner workspace and opened his laptop, but instead of diving into the day's assigned tasks, he accessed a different screen, one that existed on his personal servers, protected by military-grade encryption and accessible only through credentials that Dataflow Solutions had never seen. The neural processing engine's real-time dashboard materialized on his monitor, displaying information that would have made Dataflow's executives either terrified or ecstatic, depending on their capacity for understanding what they were seeing. Customer behavior prediction algorithms running at 97.3% accuracy. Database optimization routines handling 2.7 million queries per hour. Automated conflict resolution systems preventing what would have been 47 separate system failures. In the past 24 hours alone, all invisible. All essential. All completely unknown to the people who had just finished laughing at his request for appropriate compensation. Marcus pulled up another screen, this one showing his carefully maintained legal documentation. Patent applications filed under his personal name. Copyright registrations for proprietary algorithms. Licensing agreements that established his ownership of every innovation he'd developed outside Dataflow's official work hours, which, given his 16-hour days, represented approximately 70% of the neural processing engine's functionality. He had learned this lesson the hard way at his previous job, watching a brilliant colleague named David Kim get screwed out of millions when their startup was acquired by Google. David had developed revolutionary compression algorithms on company time, using company equipment, and had signed standard employment contracts that gave the company ownership of anything he created. When Google bought the startup for $180 million, David received a pat on the back and a modest retention bonus, while the executives became multimillionaires overnight. Marcus had sworn never to make that mistake. His phone buzzed with a text from Derek Liu, his college roommate who had transitioned from academia to the private sector 2 years earlier. Dude, just saw the TechCrunch article about Dataflow's Q3 performance. You guys are crushing it. Must be nice to work for the industry leader. The message was well-intentioned, but it highlighted exactly the problem Marcus faced. Dataflow was indeed crushing it, posting record revenues and profit margins that made them the envy of their competitors. But the success story was built on innovations that belonged to Marcus Chen, implemented by Marcus Chen, and maintained by Marcus Chen, while the credit and compensation flowed to executives who couldn't code their way out of a paper bag. Marcus opened a new browser window and began researching something he'd never seriously considered before, his actual market value. The process proved more complex than he'd anticipated. Standard salary comparison websites focused on job titles and basic responsibilities, but Marcus's work transcended traditional categories. He wasn't just a junior software developer, he was a machine learning architect, systems optimization specialist, predictive analytics expert, and infrastructure engineer rolled into one person. He started by analyzing job postings for similar roles at other companies. Senior AI engineers at Google were earning $280,000 base salary plus equity and bonuses. Machine learning architects at Microsoft commanded $320,000 annually. Principal engineers at Netflix pulled down $400,000 for building recommendation systems. Far less sophisticated than Marcus's customer behavior prediction algorithms, but even these high-end salaries undervalued what Marcus brought to Dataflow. He wasn't just implementing existing technologies, he was inventing new approaches to problems that the entire industry struggled with. Marcus spent his lunch break in the company library, a quiet space on the 15th floor that most employees ignored in favor of the more social cafeteria. Surrounded by technical manuals and whiteboards covered in forgotten equations, he began building a comprehensive model of his contributions to Dataflow's business performance. The analysis required combining publicly available financial data with his inside knowledge of the company's operational metrics. Marcus tracked correlations between specific system improvements and customer acquisition rates, between uptime optimizations and client retention percentages, between response time enhancements and contract renewal statistics. The results were staggering, even to Marcus himself. Dataflow's annual revenue had grown from $12.3 million to $53.7 million during his tenure, a 337% increase that significantly outpaced industry averages. Their profit margins had improved from -8.2% to +34.1%, transforming a money-losing operation into one of the most profitable companies in their sector. More importantly, Marcus could demonstrate direct causal relationships between his work and these improvements. The customer behavior prediction algorithms had increased sales conversion rates by 47%. The automated conflict resolution systems had reduced customer service costs by 62% while improving satisfaction scores. The real-time optimization routines had eliminated the expensive server crashes that had plagued Dataflow's early years. Conservative estimates suggested that Marcus's innovations were directly responsible for at least $28 million of Dataflow's annual revenue growth. Using standard industry multipliers for technology company valuations, his work had created approximately $200 million in shareholder value, and Dataflow was paying him $65,000 per year for it. The mathematical inequality was so extreme that Marcus initially questioned his calculations. He reran the analysis using different methodologies, more conservative assumptions, and alternative correlation models. Every approach yielded similar results. Marcus Chen was generating value that exceeded his compensation by a factor of at least 400 to 1. That evening, Marcus sat in his studio apartment, a space so small that his desk doubled as his dining table, and contemplated the magnitude of his situation. Through the single window, he could see Dataflow's office building glowing against the night sky, its lights representing hundreds of employees working late to maintain systems they didn't understand. His laptop displayed two browser windows side by side. On the left, Dataflow's latest quarterly report boasted about innovative technological solutions and industry-leading performance metrics. On the right, Marcus's personal financial planning spreadsheet showed the harsh reality of living on $65,000 in an expensive city while carrying student loan debt. The cognitive dissonance was becoming unbearable. Marcus opened a new document and began drafting what would become the most important presentation of his professional life. Unlike his usual technical documentation, this presentation needed to speak the language of business executives who measured success in revenue and profit rather than elegance and efficiency. The opening slide was deliberately provocative. How Marcus Chen generated $200 million in shareholder value while earning $195,000 over 3 years. From there, Marcus built a methodical case that even Richard Hawthorne couldn't dismiss. He documented specific projects with quantifiable business impacts, customer retention improvements that saved the company millions in acquisition costs, performance optimizations that allowed Dataflow to serve 3 times as many clients without proportional infrastructure investments, predictive analytics that identified high-value prospects and reduced sales cycle times. Each slide contained irrefutable data, charts that showed clear correlations between Marcus's work and business outcomes, and conservative financial projections that demonstrated the return on investment for his proposed salary adjustment. The final slide presented his request, $195,000 annually, which represented exactly 1% of the annual value he generated for the company. Marcus spent the weekend refining his presentation, anticipating objections, and preparing responses to every possible criticism. He researched comparable salaries at competitor companies, analyzed Dataflow's budget allocations, and even studied Richard Hawthorne's public statements about investing in our most valuable assets. By Sunday evening, Marcus had created a presentation that was simultaneously humble and irrefutable. He wasn't demanding executive compensation or equity participation. He was simply asking to be paid a fraction of what his work was actually worth to the company. Monday morning brought the first signs that Marcus's situation was about to change, though not in the way he expected. "Marcus, got a minute?" Trevor Walsh appeared at his cubicle with an expression that Marcus had learned to associate with impossible deadlines and emergency bug fixes. "What's the crisis today?" Marcus asked, saving his work and preparing for another session of solving problems that officially didn't exist. "Client presentation to Pinnacle Insurance this afternoon. Their CTO is asking specific questions about our predictive analytics capabilities. Hawthorne wants detailed technical specs and performance benchmarks." Marcus nodded, accustomed to these last-minute requests for information about systems that were supposedly standard industry technology. "How detailed?" "Enough to convince them. We're not just marketing hype. They're considering a $4.2 million contract expansion, but their technical team is skeptical about our claimed response times." The irony was perfect. Pinnacle Insurance's skepticism was entirely reasonable. The performance metrics Dataflow advertised were indeed too good to be true for conventional systems. What they didn't know was that Dataflow's platform was powered by innovations that wouldn't be commercially available from other vendors for another 5 to 10 years. "I'll prepare a technical overview," Marcus said. "But I'll need access to the actual performance data, not the sanitized metrics we usually share." Trevor hesitated. How much detail are we talking about? Enough to prove we can deliver what we're promising. If they're considering a $4.2 million investment, they deserve to see real numbers. That afternoon, Marcus found himself in a conference room with Pinnacle Insurance's technical team, walking them through architectural diagrams and performance benchmarks that showcased the neural processing engine's capabilities without revealing its existence. These response times are remarkable, said Dr. Jennifer Park, Pinnacle's chief technology officer. How are you achieving sub-200 millisecond processing for complex behavioral analysis queries? Marcus had prepared for this question. Proprietary optimization algorithms combined with predictive caching and parallel processing architectures. Can you elaborate on the optimization algorithms? This was dangerous territory. Marcus couldn't explain the machine learning techniques that powered the NPE without revealing information that would complicate the intellectual property questions he'd carefully avoided. I'm afraid those details are protected by trade secrets and non-disclosure agreements. Dr. Park smiled. Of course. But from a high-level perspective, how do you maintain accuracy while achieving such impressive speed? Marcus spent the next 20 minutes explaining theoretical approaches that approximated what the neural processing engine actually did, describing general methodologies without revealing specific implementations. It was like explaining how a Ferrari worked while pretending it was a Honda Civic. The presentation was successful beyond Dataflow's expectations. Pinnacle Insurance not only approved the $4.2 million contract expansion but also expressed interest in additional services that could potentially double their annual spending with Dataflow. Outstanding work, Richard Hawthorne told Marcus as they walked back to the elevators. Presentations like that are why Dataflow is the industry leader. Marcus nodded politely, thinking about how Hawthorne had no idea that the industry-leading capabilities he was praising were entirely dependent on one person's innovations. Innovations that could disappear at any moment if that person decided to take his skills elsewhere. That evening, Marcus received a call from Derek Liu with news that would accelerate everything. Marcus, you need to hear this. Technova just announced. They're raising $50 million in Series B funding specifically to develop advanced AI solutions for enterprise clients. Amanda Foster, their CEO, mentioned in the TechCrunch interview that they're actively recruiting visionary engineers who understand the future of machine learning applications. Marcus looked up Technova's website while Derek continued talking. The company had been founded 3 years earlier by former executives from Oracle and Salesforce, with a mission to democratize artificial intelligence for business applications. Their current platform was respectable but unremarkable, exactly the kind of foundation that could be transformed by the right technological innovations. They're offering senior engineer positions starting at $140,000, plus equity that could be worth millions if they go public, Derek continued. Want me to put in a word with their recruiting team? 6 months earlier, Marcus would have politely declined out of loyalty to Dataflow. But loyalty was a luxury he could no longer afford, especially when it wasn't reciprocated by employers who viewed him as easily replaceable. Send me their contact information, Marcus said. It might be worth exploring. But even as he said it, Marcus knew that simply switching jobs wouldn't address the fundamental injustice of his situation. Dataflow had built their entire success story on his innovations while treating him like a disposable commodity. A traditional resignation would allow them to continue benefiting from his work while he started over elsewhere. That night, Marcus opened a new research project that would change everything, understanding the legal and practical implications of intellectual property ownership in the modern technology industry. The investigation revealed fascinating possibilities that most employees never considered. Software developers who created innovations using their own time and resources retained ownership rights, even if they worked for companies that claimed broad intellectual property agreements. Licensing deals that allowed inventors to monetize their creations while maintaining control over future development. Acquisition strategies that enabled small companies to purchase technologies from individual creators. Marcus began to envision a different approach. Entirely, one that would ensure he received fair compensation for his innovations while teaching Dataflow a lesson about the true cost of undervaluing exceptional talent. He started by documenting everything, every algorithm, every optimization technique, every architectural decision that made the neural processing engine revolutionary. He created comprehensive technical specifications that would allow any competent development team to understand and implement his innovations, but more importantly, Marcus began reaching out to companies that might be interested in acquiring technology that could transform their competitive position overnight. The first response came from Technova within 48 hours of his initial inquiry. Marcus Chin printed his resignation letter on a Tuesday morning, the crisp white paper emerging from the ancient printer that Dataflow had been promising to replace for 2 years. The letter was deliberately brief, 2 paragraphs thanking the company for the opportunity and providing standard 2 weeks' notice. No mention of grievances, no dramatic declarations, nothing that would hint at the storm brewing beneath the surface. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into a manila envelope, then walked across the development floor toward Trevor Walsh's office. His colleagues barely looked up from their screens as he passed. Why would they? Marcus had been making this same walk dozens of times over the past 3 years, usually carrying bug reports or project updates that Trevor would glance at and file away. Trevor was on a conference call when Marcus knocked, gesticulating wildly at his webcam while discussing quarterly metrics with someone who clearly wasn't listening. Marcus waited in the doorway until Trevor noticed him and held up one finger, mouthing, "Just a minute," with the exaggerated patience of someone who considered interruptions a personal affront. "Sorry about that," Trevor said after ending the call. "Procurement wants to know why we're over budget on server costs again. As if I personally control Amazon's pricing structure." He leaned back in his ergonomic chair, the kind that cost more than Marcus made in a month. "What's up?" Marcus placed the envelope on Trevor's desk without ceremony. "My resignation. 2 weeks' notice is required by the employee handbook." For a moment, Trevor just stared at the envelope as if it might contain anthrax. Then he picked it up, opened it, and read the brief contents twice before looking back at Marcus with genuine bewilderment. "Is this some kind of joke? Did someone put you up to this?" "No joke. I've accepted a position elsewhere." "Marcus, come on. Sit down. Let's talk about this." Trevor gestured to the uncomfortable plastic chair across from his desk, the same chair where Marcus had been told his contributions were worth a 3% raise. "Look, I know you were disappointed about the salary discussion, but that doesn't mean we can't work something out. Maybe we could look at a promotion path, get you some additional responsibilities." Marcus remained standing. "The decision is final. I'll spend the next 2 weeks documenting my current projects and ensuring a smooth transition." "But you can't just leave. Your institutional knowledge. You know things about our systems that nobody else knows." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on Marcus. Trevor was absolutely right. Marcus knew things about their systems that nobody else knew. He knew everything about their systems, because he had essentially rebuilt them from scratch. But Trevor had no idea how literally true his words were. "I'm sure the team will adapt," Marcus said. "After all, I'm just a junior developer working on maintenance tasks." He turned and walked out of Trevor's office, leaving his supervisor staring after him with an expression of growing panic. Word of Marcus's resignation spread through the development floor like wildfire. Within an hour, half a dozen colleagues had wandered over to his cubicle, each offering their own theory about his sudden departure. "I heard Google recruited you," said Kevin Park from the front-end team, his voice carrying a mixture of envy and respect. "Did they offer you one of those crazy Silicon Valley packages?" "Must be nice to have options," added Jennifer Walsh, no relation to Trevor despite the shared surname. "The rest of us are stuck here until something better comes along." Marcus deflected their questions with vague responses about new opportunities and career growth, all while continuing his usual work routine. To anyone watching, he appeared to be the same dedicated employee he'd always been, staying late to finish projects and helping colleagues with technical problems, but underneath the facade, Marcus was executing the most critical phase of his plan. Each evening after his coworkers left, Marcus remained at his desk, ostensibly working on documentation for his replacement. In reality, he was fine-tuning the degradation protocol that would gradually cripple Dataflow's systems over the coming weeks. The process was more complex than simply turning off the neural processing engine. That would have been obvious sabotage, easily traced back to Marcus's departure. Instead, he was implementing what he thought of as planned obsolescence, programming the NPE to slowly reduce its effectiveness over time, mimicking the natural decay of poorly maintained software. Database optimization routines would become less efficient each day, allowing query times to creep upward. Predictive algorithms would gradually lose accuracy, causing customer service systems to provide less helpful responses. Load balancing mechanisms would become increasingly crude, leading to server overloads during peak usage periods. The beauty of the approach was its deniability. When Dataflow's performance began to decline, it would look exactly like what happened to most companies that relied on outdated technology and deferred maintenance. Their new development team would waste months trying to fix problems that couldn't be fixed, because the problems were actually the absence of solutions they didn't know existed. Marcus built multiple redundancies into the degradation protocol, knowing that Dataflow's technical team would inevitably discover some of the declining processes and attempt to repair them. Each fix would work temporarily, creating a false sense of security, before the next wave of degradation began. By the time they realized the scope of what was happening, the neural processing engine would be completely disconnected from their systems, and Marcus would be safely established at Technova with ironclad legal protection for his intellectual property. On his second-to-last day at Dataflow, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Richard Hawthorne himself appeared at his cubicle. Looking distinctly uncomfortable in the cramped space between Marcus's desk and the storage closet. "Marcus, good to see you," Hawthorne said with forced cheerfulness, as if they were old friends meeting at a coffee shop instead of CEO and employee who had last spoken in a conference room full of laughter. "Trevor tells me you're moving on to greener pastures." "That's right," Marcus replied, not looking up from his keyboard. "Well, I wanted to personally thank you for your contributions to the company. You've been reliable, dependable, the kind of steady worker that makes a business successful." Marcus finally looked up, meeting Hawthorne's eyes with an expression of polite interest. "I appreciate that. In fact," Hawthorne continued, clearly working up to something, "I've been thinking about our conversation a few weeks ago. Maybe I was a bit hasty in my response. Maybe there's room for negotiation on the compensation front." This was the moment Marcus had been waiting for, the moment when Dataflow would finally recognize his value. 3 weeks ago, this conversation would have changed everything. Marcus would have been thrilled to discuss a reasonable raise, to find a middle ground that reflected his contributions while respecting the company's budget constraints, but 3 weeks ago, Marcus hadn't yet discovered what he was truly worth on the open market. 3 weeks ago, he hadn't realized that his innovations were valuable enough to build an entire company around. 3 weeks ago, he hadn't signed a $12 million deal with Technova for technology that Dataflow could have owned for a fraction of that cost. "That's very generous of you," Marcus said. "But I've already committed to my new position. I wouldn't want to go back on my word." Hawthorne's friendly mask slipped slightly. "Marcus, let's be realistic here. You're a talented programmer, no doubt about it. But the market for developers is volatile. This new company you're joining, do you really think they're going to value you the way we do? Do you think they understand your specific skill set?" The condescension in Hawthorne's voice was breathtaking. Even now, faced with the loss of his most valuable employee, the CEO couldn't resist talking down to Marcus like he was a naive child who didn't understand the harsh realities of business. "I'm confident they'll appreciate my contributions," Marcus said. "Look, I'll be straight with you. We're prepared to offer you $85,000. That's a significant bump from your current salary, and it comes with a promotion to senior developer. Full benefits, stock options, the works. What do you say?" $85,000. A 30% raise that would have seemed like a fortune just a month ago. Marcus did the math quickly in his head. Technova was paying him $12 million for the neural processing engine, plus $300,000 per year for 5 years of consulting. In total, he would earn nearly 14 times his entire lifetime Dataflow salary in the next 5 years alone. "I'm flattered by the offer," Marcus said, "but my decision is final." Hawthorne's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Marcus. A big one. You think the grass is greener somewhere else, but you have no idea how good you've had it here. We've given you stability, job security, opportunities to learn and grow. And this is how you repay us? By walking away when we need you most?" The accusation was so absurd that Marcus almost laughed. Dataflow had given him nothing but a paycheck that barely covered his expenses and a workspace next to a storage closet. Every opportunity for learning and growth had come from his own initiative, his own research, his own late-night experimentation with technologies that Dataflow was too conservative to adopt. "I understand you're disappointed," Marcus said. "But I'm sure the company will continue to thrive without me." That evening, Marcus worked later than usual, implementing the final components of the degradation protocol. He embedded the code deep within system processes that would be difficult for other developers to locate. Disguised as routine maintenance scripts and optimization routines, the NPE would continue functioning normally for exactly 12 more days. Long enough for Marcus to complete his notice period and begin his new job at Technova. Then, on a random Tuesday morning 2 weeks after his departure, the first wave of degradation would begin. Response times would increase by just enough to be noticeable. Customer complaints would start trickling in. The technical team would scramble to identify the source of the problems, never realizing that the solution was walking out the door with Marcus Chen.as. Marcus packed up his personal belongings on his final day. His colleagues gathered around his cubicle with awkward farewells and promises to stay in touch. Several offered to be references for future opportunities, unaware that Marcus had already secured a position that would make him wealthier than most of them would ever dream of becoming. Trevor Walsh appeared with a cardboard box and a forced smile. "All set? Security needs to escort you out," just standard procedure, nothing personal. Marcus nodded and followed Trevor toward the elevator, carrying 3 years of accumulated desk items in a box that weighed less than 5 pounds. A coffee mug from a long-forgotten company picnic. A desk lamp he'd bought with his own money because the fluorescent lighting gave him headaches. A small cactus that somehow survived in the windowless environment of his corner cubicle. As the elevator doors closed and Marcus descended from the 20th floor for the last time, he felt a mixture of anticipation and melancholy. Dataflow Solutions had no idea what they had just lost, and in 2 weeks, their ignorance would begin costing them everything, but Marcus Chen was finally heading somewhere that recognized his true worth. The elevator reached the ground floor. And Marcus stepped out into the lobby, walking past the company logo etched in marble and the motivational posters about teamwork and innovation. In a few months, when Dataflow Systems began their inevitable collapse, those posters would seem like bitter jokes. Marcus pushed through the revolving doors and emerged onto the busy sidewalk, where his new life was waiting. Monday morning at Technova felt like stepping into an alternate reality. Instead of a cramped cubicle wedged between a server room and storage closet, Marcus Chen found himself in a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the downtown tech district. The desk was modern glass and steel, equipped with 3 high-resolution monitors and a workstation powerful enough to run complex simulations. A small refrigerator in the corner was stocked with energy drinks and premium coffee pods, but the most striking difference wasn't the physical space. It was how people treated him. Marcus, welcome to the team, Amanda Foster, Technova's CEO, greeted him personally at reception. She was younger than Richard Hawthorne, probably mid-30s, with the kind of focused energy that came from building something meaningful rather than just maintaining existing structures. Ready to change the world? The orientation process was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. Instead of filling out paperwork in HR and watching outdated training videos, he spent his first day meeting with department heads who actually understood technology. They asked intelligent questions about implementation strategies, scalability challenges, and integration timelines. These weren't executives pretending to comprehend technical concepts, they were former engineers who had moved into leadership roles while maintaining their expertise. We've assembled a dedicated team to work with you on the neural processing engine deployment, explained Dr. Sarah Kim, Technova's chief technology officer. She had 3 computer science degrees from MIT and had published papers on machine learning algorithms that Marcus had actually read and cited in his own research. 12 senior developers, 4 data scientists, and 2 systems architects. All handpicked based on their experience with advanced AI implementations. Marcus reviewed the team profiles Amanda provided, impressed despite himself. These weren't junior developers who would need months of training to understand complex concepts. They were seasoned professionals with backgrounds at companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Netflix. Several had worked on projects that Marcus recognized from industry publications. When can we see the full NPE codebase? Asked James Morrison, the lead systems architect. He had spent 5 years building Netflix's recommendation engine before joining Technova 6 months earlier. I'm particularly interested in real-time optimization algorithms. The performance metrics you showed us suggest approaches that shouldn't be theoretically possible with current hardware limitations. This was the conversation Marcus had been waiting 3 years to have. Finally, people who could appreciate the sophistication of what he'd built, who understood the technical innovations that made the neural processing engine revolutionary rather than just effective. The codebase is extensive, Marcus replied. Over 2 million lines across 17 different modules. I'll need about a week to prepare comprehensive documentation and set up development environments for the team. Take whatever time you need, Amanda said. We're not rushing this. We want to do it right. As Marcus settled into his new routine, he found himself working with an enthusiasm he hadn't felt since his early days at Dataflow. The Technova team approached problems with intellectual curiosity rather than risk aversion. When Marcus suggested experimental approaches to optimize the NPE's learning algorithms, instead of expressing concerns about stability and testing protocols, they responded with excitement about potential breakthroughs. Meanwhile, 1,400 miles away, Dataflow Solutions was beginning to experience the first symptoms of what would become a terminal diagnosis. Marcus didn't actively monitor Dataflow systems. That would have been unethical and potentially illegal, but he didn't need to. The degradation protocol he'd implemented was designed to create problems that would inevitably become public knowledge. Customer complaints on social media, performance issues mentioned in industry forums, technical difficulties that would force Dataflow to make embarrassing announcements. The first public sign appeared on a Wednesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after Marcus's departure. A major client, Pinnacle Insurance, posted a frustrated message on Twitter, experiencing significant slowdowns with its Dataflow Solutions platform today. Customer inquiries taking 3-4x normal time to process. Anyone else seeing similar issues? The response thread filled with similar complaints from other Dataflow customers. Response times that had been consistently under 200 milliseconds were now spiking to over 800 milliseconds during peak usage periods. Database queries that used to return instantaneous results were taking several seconds to complete. Dataflow's official response was predictably corporate. We are aware of performance issues affecting some users and are working diligently to resolve them. We apologize for any inconvenience and appreciate your patience. Marcus saw the announcement during his lunch break and felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The degradation protocol was working exactly as designed, but he took no pleasure in the frustration of innocent customers who had done nothing wrong. They were collateral damage in a war between Marcus and Dataflow's leadership. At Technova, Marcus threw himself into rebuilding the neural processing engine for a new environment. The original NPE had been crafted specifically for Dataflow's infrastructure, with custom interfaces and optimization routines tailored to their particular system architecture. Creating a version that could be deployed across multiple client environments required significant engineering work. This is remarkable, Dr. Kim said during one of their daily technical reviews. She was examining Marcus's code on a massive wall-mounted display, highlighting particularly elegant algorithms with obvious appreciation. The way you've handled state management in distributed systems solves problems that most companies spend years struggling with. How did you develop these approaches? Trial and error, mostly, Marcus replied. I had access to a production environment where I could test different strategies and see real-world performance impacts. What he didn't mention was that his trial and error had been conducted using Dataflow's actual customer data and traffic patterns, giving him insights that most developers could only dream of. He'd spent 3 years optimizing the NPE against genuine business challenges rather than theoretical scenarios. The reconstruction work was intellectually stimulating in ways that Marcus hadn't experienced since graduate school. Instead of maintaining legacy systems and fixing other people's mistakes, he was building something new from the ground up, incorporating lessons learned from years of production experience. We're thinking about the go-to-market strategy, Amanda mentioned during one of their weekly check-ins. Based on the NPE's capabilities, we could target everything from e-commerce platforms to financial services to healthcare systems. The addressable market is potentially enormous. Marcus had prepared for this conversation. During his research phase before leaving Dataflow, he'd identified dozens of companies that could benefit from NPE technology. I'd recommend starting with mid-sized businesses that are experiencing rapid growth. They have the budget to invest in advanced solutions but lack the internal resources to develop them independently. That's exactly our thinking. Companies like Dataflow, actually. Amanda paused, studying Marcus's expression. Speaking of which, how are things going over there? Any word from your former colleagues? Marcus had been expecting this question. Technova's leadership wasn't naive. They understood that acquiring technology from a current employee of a competitor created potential complications. They needed to ensure that Dataflow wouldn't pursue legal action that could delay or complicate the NPE launch. I haven't maintained contact with anyone there, Marcus said truthfully. But from what I've seen publicly, they're dealing with some technical challenges. That was an understatement. By the end of Marcus's third week at Technova, Dataflow's problems had escalated beyond isolated performance issues. The degradation protocol had progressed to its second phase, introducing more sophisticated failures that would be increasingly difficult to diagnose and repair. Customer service response times weren't just slower, they were becoming actively unhelpful. The predictive algorithms that had learned to anticipate user needs and provide relevant solutions were gradually forgetting their training, reverting to generic responses that frustrated customers and overwhelmed support staff. Dataflow's technical team was working around the clock trying to identify the source of their problems. Marcus could imagine the scene: tired developers running diagnostic scripts, analyzing log files, and implementing fixes that worked temporarily before mysterious new issues emerged elsewhere in the system. Trevor Walsh had probably assigned the entire development team to what he would dramatically call emergency protocols. They would be checking code repositories for recent changes, reviewing deployment logs for suspicious activities, and testing individual system components for signs of malicious interference. They would find nothing, because there was nothing malicious to find. The degradation protocol wasn't attacking Dataflow systems, it was simply the absence of protective measures that had been quietly maintaining their stability for 3 years. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Derek Liu, his college roommate who had originally suggested he apply to Technova. Dude, what did you do to your old company? Everyone in the industry is talking about Dataflow's meltdown. That evening, Marcus searched industry news sites and technical forums for mentions of Dataflow's situation. The story was spreading beyond their immediate customer base as competitors began highlighting the performance differences between their own platforms and Dataflow's struggling systems. Dataflow Solutions, a cautionary tale of technical debt, read one headline on TechCrunch. The article speculated that Dataflow had prioritized rapid growth over infrastructure investment, allowing their systems to become increasingly unstable. As customer demand exceeded their platform's capabilities, the analysis was completely wrong, but it sounded plausible enough that industry observers accepted it without question. Dataflow had become a textbook example of what happened when companies failed to invest adequately in their technical foundations. Reading the coverage, Marcus felt a moment of genuine sympathy for his former colleagues. The rank-and-file developers at Dataflow were competent professionals who had been thrust into an impossible situation. They were being blamed for system failures they couldn't understand, let alone fix, because the real solution was locked away in Marcus's mind and Technova's servers, but his sympathy was tempered by the memory of that conference room laughter. Richard Hawthorne and the executive team had created this situation through their own arrogance and short-sightedness. They had been offered the opportunity to retain their most valuable asset for a fraction of its true worth, and they had responded with mockery. Now they were discovering the real cost of that decision. At Technova, work on the NPE continued at an accelerated pace. Marcus's new team had proven remarkably capable of understanding and extending his original architecture. They suggested improvements that he hadn't considered, optimization strategies that leveraged newer technologies unavailable when he'd first built the system. We should be ready for alpha testing within 6 weeks, James Morrison reported during their Friday progress meeting. The core algorithms are stable, and we've successfully integrated them with our standard deployment framework. Initial performance benchmarks are exceeding even our optimistic projections. Amanda smiled with the satisfaction of an executive watching a major investment pay off ahead of schedule. Excellent. I'll start reaching out to potential pilot customers. Marcus, any suggestions for companies that might be interested in early access? Marcus had a list ready, compiled during his research into Dataflow's competitors and potential clients. Meridian Logistics has been struggling with supply chain optimization. Global Tech Manufacturing needs better predictive maintenance for their equipment. Sterling Financial mentioned in their last quarterly report that they're investing heavily in customer experience improvements. All three companies were current Dataflow customers. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that Technova's first clients would likely be businesses fleeing Dataflow's platform as its performance continued to deteriorate. The same technology that had once made Dataflow the industry leader would now be used to attract customers away from them. As Marcus drove home that Friday evening, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just 3 weeks. The cramped studio apartment had been replaced by a spacious 2-bedroom place in Technova's neighborhood. The 12-year-old Honda Civic now sat in a covered parking garage next to much newer vehicles belonging to his new colleagues, but more importantly, Marcus finally felt like he was being treated as the professional he actually was. His ideas were taken seriously, his expertise was valued, and his contributions were compensated fairly. The weekend ahead promised to be the first in years where Marcus wouldn't spend his free time working on side projects or studying new technologies to stay ahead of industry trends. For once, his day job was challenging and rewarding enough to satisfy his intellectual curiosity. Meanwhile, Dataflow Solutions faced a weekend of emergency meetings and crisis management as their problems continued to multiply. The war between Marcus Chen and his former employer was far from over, but the first major battle had been decisively 1.6 weeks after Marcus Chen walked out of Dataflow Solutions for the last time. The company's 32nd floor conference room hosted a meeting that would have been unimaginable during their glory days. The same mahogany table where executives had once celebrated record-breaking quarters now served as ground zero for the most devastating corporate crisis in the company's 15-year history. Richard Hawthorne sat hunched over a stack of printed reports, his usual commanding presence reduced to that of a man watching his empire crumble in real time. The expensive suit he wore couldn't hide the toll that weeks of sleepless nights and emergency phone calls had taken on his appearance. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee cup, his 6th of the morning, judging by the collection of empty containers scattered across the table. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, his voice lacking its customary confidence, "we're facing what can only be described as a perfect storm of technical failures. Sarah, please walk us through the current client situation." Sarah Mitchell from Human Resources consulted her tablet with the expression of a coroner delivering autopsy results. The woman who had once processed hiring paperwork for Dataflow's explosive growth phase now spent her days managing exit interviews and damage control communications. "We've lost 63 major clients since the beginning of last month," she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "Annual recurring revenue has dropped by $28 million. Our net promoter score has fallen from positive 87 to negative 34. Customer support is receiving an average of 847 complaint tickets per day, compared to fewer than 50 during the same period last year." The numbers hit the room like physical blows. Board member Patricia Williams, who had joined Dataflow's board after the company's IPO 3 years earlier, stared at her laptop screen in disbelief. She had served on the boards of half a dozen technology companies, but had never witnessed such a rapid deterioration in customer satisfaction. "How is this mathematically possible?" she asked. "Our platform was industry-leading just 2 months ago. These metrics suggest we're operating worse than companies using technology from the 1990s. Trevor Walsh shifted uncomfortably in his chair, acutely aware that all eyes were turning toward him for technical explanations he couldn't provide. The development team leader who had once confidently dismissed Marcus Chen's contributions now found himself defending the indefensible. "We've conducted the most comprehensive system analysis in company history," Trevor said, consulting notes that he'd reviewed obsessively for weeks. "Every server has been tested, every database has been optimized, every security protocol has been verified. Individual components are functioning within acceptable parameters, but the overall system performance continues to degrade." "That's not technically possible," interrupted Dr. Michael Foster, Dataflow's chief technology officer who had been brought in from Silicon Valley 18 months earlier with great fanfare. "Systems don't spontaneously forget how to operate efficiently. There has to be a root cause: corrupted code, infrastructure failures, malicious attacks, something concrete that we can identify and fix." But Dr. Foster's confidence was undermined by his own team's growing desperation. The CTO had assigned his most experienced engineers to work around the clock, implementing fixes that worked temporarily before mysterious new problems emerged elsewhere in the system. It was like playing whack-a-mole with digital phantoms that appeared faster than they could be addressed. "What about the Marcus Chen theory?" asked Jim Rodriguez from accounting, referring to the hypothesis that some team members had begun discussing in hushed conversations around the office. The room fell silent. Everyone knew that Marcus's departure had coincided almost exactly with the beginning of their technical problems, but nobody wanted to voice the implications of that correlation, suggesting that a single junior developer had been responsible for their entire platform's stability would be tantamount to admitting that their management team had fundamentally misunderstood their own business. "Marcus was a competent programmer," Hawthorne said carefully, "but he worked on maintenance tasks and minor optimizations. The idea that one person could have been holding our entire infrastructure together is unrealistic." Trevor nodded emphatically, grateful for his CEO's support. "Exactly. Marcus handled routine bug fixes and small feature implementations. Important work, certainly, but not mission-critical to our core operations." What none of them understood was that their unrealistic theory was not only correct but dramatically understated. Marcus hadn't just been holding their infrastructure together, he had essentially rebuilt their entire platform from the ground up, creating a sophisticated system that operated so seamlessly that its existence had become invisible to everyone except its creator. The neural processing engine had been their actual product for 3 years, while the official Dataflow codebase had become little more than an elaborate user interface connecting to Marcus's innovations. Now that the NPE was gone, their platform was reverting to its original state, a collection of outdated systems held together by digital duct tape and increasingly desperate patches. "We need to discuss financial projections," Rodriguez continued, pulling up spreadsheets that painted an increasingly dire picture. "Current burn rate projections show we'll exhaust our cash reserves within 4 months if client defections continue at this pace. Operating expenses have increased by 89% due to emergency consulting fees and overtime costs for technical staff." The accounting team had been working overtime themselves, trying to model scenarios that might allow Dataflow to survive their crisis. Every projection led to the same conclusion: without a dramatic reversal of their technical problems, the company would face bankruptcy before the end of the fiscal year. Her board member Patricia Williams leaned forward, her expression grim. "What about emergency funding? Can we raise capital to buy time while these technical issues are resolved?" Hawthorne laughed bitterly. "Who's going to invest in a technology company that can't maintain its own technology? Our stock price has dropped 74% in 6 weeks. Venture capital firms that used to court us won't return our phone calls." The cruel irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Dataflow had spent years building a reputation as an innovative technology leader, attracting investment and talent based on their platform's superior performance. Now that same reputation was working against them, making their technical failures seem like evidence of fundamental incompetence rather than external factors beyond their control. Meanwhile, 1,400 miles away at Technova's headquarters, Marcus Chen was experiencing the opposite trajectory. The neural processing engine's transition to its new environment had exceeded even his own optimistic expectations, delivering performance improvements that established Technova as the industry's new technological standard bearer. Client acquisition is accelerating beyond our projections, Amanda Foster reported during their weekly leadership meeting. The Technova CEO radiated the kind of confident energy that came from watching a bold strategic bet pay off spectacularly. We've signed 37 new contracts in the past month, with an average annual value 23% higher than our initial pricing models. Dr. Sarah Kim consulted her technical reports with obvious satisfaction. The NPE 2.0 architecture is handling increased load flawlessly. Response times are consistently under 150 milliseconds even during peak usage periods. Customer satisfaction scores are averaging 9.8 across all client implementations. Marcus reviewed the client list, recognizing many names from his Dataflow days. Pinnacle Insurance, Global Tech Manufacturing, Sterling Financial, all companies that had once relied on his innovations through Dataflow's platform were now receiving superior service directly from Technova. Pinnacle Insurance's CEO called personally to thank us for resolving their customer service bottlenecks, Amanda continued. They're planning to expand their implementation to include their entire claims processing system. Potential value, $3.2 million annually. The transformation was remarkable in its speed and completeness. Companies that had struggled with Dataflow's deteriorating performance were discovering that Technova's platform solved problems they hadn't even realized they had. Customer service queries that used to require multiple interactions were now resolved instantly. Predictive analytics that had become unreliable were suddenly producing insights that drove measurable business improvements. There's something else worth discussing, Amanda said, her expression becoming more serious. We're receiving inquiries from venture capital firms about our technology licensing strategy. Apparently, word is spreading about our capabilities faster than we expected. Marcus had anticipated this development. The neural processing engine's performance advantages were too significant to remain secret for long, especially as satisfied clients began sharing their experiences with industry colleagues. Technova would soon face decisions about scaling their technology through partnerships, acquisitions, or direct licensing agreements. What kind of inquiries? He asked. Everything from strategic partnerships to acquisition offers. Meridian Ventures mentioned a preliminary valuation of $400 million for our IP portfolio. That's before any detailed due diligence or technical evaluation. The number was staggering, but Marcus wasn't entirely surprised. The NPE represented years of development work that would cost most companies tens of millions of dollars to replicate, assuming they could find engineers capable of understanding the underlying algorithms. Technova had acquired that capability for a fraction of its true value back at Dataflow Solutions. The crisis was entering its terminal phase. The company's technical problems had become so severe that maintaining basic operations required constant manual intervention from their increasingly exhausted development team. System failures are no longer isolated incidents, Trevor reported during what would prove to be one of Dataflow's final executive meetings. We're experiencing cascading problems that require multiple engineers working simultaneously to prevent complete platform collapse. Last night, Kevin Park and Maria Santos worked until 4 a.m. to restore service after our primary database cluster became unresponsive. The human cost of Dataflow's decline was becoming apparent throughout the organization. Employees who had once taken pride in working for an innovative technology leader now dreaded coming to work, knowing they would face another day of fighting impossible technical battles. Resignation letters were arriving weekly as team members sought opportunities with companies that weren't actively falling apart. We need to consider more drastic measures, said Patricia Williams, the board member who had been advocating for radical changes since the crisis began. Merger, acquisition, strategic partnership, something that provides us with resources and expertise we clearly lack internally. Hawthorne resisted the suggestion with the desperation of a man clinging to his life's work. We built this company from nothing. We're not giving up control to some corporate vulture that wants to strip us for parts. But even as he spoke, Hawthorne knew his options were disappearing. Dataflow's market value had fallen so dramatically that they were becoming an attractive acquisition target for larger companies looking to purchase their client contracts and intellectual property at fire sale prices. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Dataflow's largest remaining client, Apex Financial Services, announced they were terminating their contract effective immediately. Their platform has become unreliable to the point of being unusable, Apex's CTO explained in a statement that was picked up by industry publications. We cannot risk our customers' financial data on systems that experience daily outages and performance failures. Apex's departure triggered a panic among Dataflow's remaining clients. If a company with Apex's technical sophistication couldn't make Dataflow's platform work reliably, what hope did smaller businesses have? Within 48 hours, 6 more major clients had submitted termination notices. We're effectively out of business, Rodriguez announced during an emergency board meeting called to address the Apex situation. Current revenue projections show we'll be unable to meet payroll obligations within 6 weeks. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Hawthorne's pen clicking repeatedly, a nervous habit that had become more pronounced as his company disintegrated around him. What about bankruptcy protection? Asked Patricia Williams. Chapter 11 would give us time to restructure and find solutions to these technical problems. Bankruptcy would destroy what's left of our reputation, Hawthorne replied. No client would trust their data to a company operating under court protection. Dr. Foster cleared his throat. There might be another option. I've received preliminary interest from several companies about acquiring our technology assets and client contracts. The valuations aren't optimal, but they would allow us to avoid bankruptcy and provide some return for shareholders. The idea of selling Dataflow Solutions would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier, when the company seemed positioned for unlimited growth. Now it represented the only pathway that didn't end in complete financial devastation for everyone involved. The following week, Dataflow's leadership team met with potential acquirers, each presentation more humiliating than the last. Companies that had once viewed Dataflow as a formidable competitor now saw them as a distressed asset to be purchased cheaply. Global Tech Corporation emerged as the leading bidder, offering $47 million for Dataflow's client contracts, brand name, and remaining intellectual property. The offer represented less than 15% of Dataflow's valuation just 1 year earlier. It's insulting, Hawthorne said after reviewing Global Tech's terms. We're worth 10 times that amount. We were worth 10 times that amount, Patricia Williams corrected. Our current situation is quite different. The acquisition negotiations revealed the extent of Dataflow's technical deterioration. Global Tech's due diligence team concluded that most of Dataflow's infrastructure would need to be completely rebuilt, describing the existing systems as fundamentally unstable and unsuitable for enterprise applications. They're basically buying our customer relationships and office furniture, Trevor said after reviewing Global Tech's technical assessment. Everything we built is being written off as worthless. Marcus Chen learned about Dataflow's impending sale through industry news coverage, reading about it while having lunch at Technova's executive dining room. The company that had once seemed so powerful and permanent was being reduced to a footnote in someone else's quarterly earnings report. Feel any sympathy for your former colleagues? Dr. Kim asked, joining Marcus at his table. Marcus considered the question while watching the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Somewhere out there, people he had worked alongside for 3 years were cleaning out their desks and updating their resumes, casualties of a corporate collapse they didn't understand. I feel bad for the developers and support staff, he said. Finally. They were just trying to do their jobs. But the executive team? Marcus shrugged. They made their choices. 3 months after Marcus's departure, Dataflow Solutions officially ceased to exist as an independent company. Global Tech completed their acquisition, immediately terminating most of Dataflow's senior management and announcing plans to restructure operations for improved efficiency. Richard Hawthorne received a severance package worth $1.2 million, generous by normal standards, but a fraction of the wealth he had accumulated during Dataflow's successful years. More importantly, his reputation as a technology industry leader was permanently damaged. Subsequent job searches would be complicated by potential employers' awareness of his role in Dataflow's spectacular failure. Trevor Walsh found himself unemployed for the first time in his career, competing with dozens of other former Dataflow employees for positions at companies that viewed their resumes with suspicion. The technical skills that had seemed adequate at Dataflow were revealed to be insufficient for the modern technology industry. Dr. Michael Foster, the CTO who had never understood that his platform was powered by someone else's innovations, accepted a position with a consulting firm that specialized in helping failed technology companies understand what had gone wrong. Meanwhile, Technova's success story continued accelerating. The neural processing engine had become the foundation for a comprehensive artificial intelligence platform that attracted clients from industries ranging from healthcare to aerospace. Manufacturing. We're expanding internationally, Amanda announced during a company-wide meeting in Technova's main auditorium. European operations will launch next quarter, followed by Asian markets within 18 months. Conservative projections. Show will be serving over 500 enterprise clients by the end of next year. Marcus had been promoted to Chief Innovation Officer, with equity compensation that made him a multimillionaire before his 30th birthday. His office occupied an entire corner of Technova's top floor, with panoramic views of the city and computing resources that would have seemed like science fiction during his data flow days, but more significantly, Marcus had become one of the technology industry's most sought-after thought leaders. Conference organizers competed to secure his speaking engagements. Technology publications featured his insights on artificial intelligence and machine learning applications. Universities offered him research positions and honorary degrees, the invisible programmer who had once fixed everyone's problems while receiving no recognition had transformed into a highly visible expert whose opinions shaped industry trends and investment decisions. 1 year after leaving Dataflow Solutions, Marcus received an unexpected LinkedIn message from his former supervisor. Trevor Walsh had eventually found employment with a regional software company, working for significantly reduced compensation and considerably fewer responsibilities. Marcus, I hope you're doing well, the message read. I've been following your success at Technova and want to congratulate you on your achievements. I should have recognized your contributions more clearly when we worked together. If you're ever willing to discuss consulting opportunities or references, I would appreciate the chance to reconnect. Best regards, Trevor. Marcus stared at the message for several minutes, remembering the man who had dismissed his raise request as unrealistic and described his work as maintenance tasks. The irony was profound. Trevor was now asking for help from the same person whose value he had failed to recognize when it mattered. He deleted the message without responding. Some professional relationships, once destroyed by arrogance and short-sightedness, weren't worth salvaging. The conference room where Marcus had been laughed at for requesting fair compensation was now empty, part of an office building that Global Tech had abandoned in favor of consolidating Dataflow's remaining operations into their existing facilities. The mahogany table where executives had dismissed his worth as a comedy routine was probably gathering dust in a corporate liquidation warehouse, and Marcus Chen, the programmer they had underestimated, was building the future of artificial intelligence with a company that understood exactly how valuable he truly was. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's proving that you were right all along. While your former tormentors are left wondering what went wrong, the laughter that had echoed through that conference room had been silenced forever, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a man who had transformed humiliation into triumph through patience, intelligence, and the unwavering conviction that he deserved better than what Dataflow Solutions had been willing to offer. Marcus Chen had learned that being underestimated was only temporary, but being irreplaceable was forever. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.